When you have like 50 wide receivers in the NFL that can all be top 36 in fantasy football, it can make picking the right guys a really difficult decision. And when we're this deep into the season playing for fantasy championships, it's more important than ever that we actually pick the right guys. And with wide receivers being highly volatile this season, we need to make sure that we've got all the information to accurately figure out who are the best guys to play. Some of you may have a lineup that is set it and forget it, but for a lot of you, trying to pick a wide receiver 2, 3 flex players is going to be a difficult task. Well, I've got my top 36 for you right now. We're going to run through them really quick, so make sure you're locked in. I'm locked in. Last video of the week, Headliner Nation. Hit the like button and let's dive into it. And number 1, Ja'Marr Chase, 39 yards away from a career high, the overall wide receiver one, and no one has been close. Cleveland is way easier to throw on than it is to run on. Him and Joe Burrow absolutely locked in. He's the top wide receiver. Puka Nacua was the only player, or at least one of them, that didn't suck last Thursday night, and he continues to be the best pass-catching option in LA. Rams need to keep winning. The Jets are a little bit tougher, allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but Jacksonville and Miami have found success against them as of late. And number 3, Justin Jefferson, 3 straight games over 13 fantasy points, and just had his first game with over 10 targets since the first week of October. We're fighting for a division there in Minnesota. Seattle allows right around the league average to wide receivers. And number 4, Nico Collins, the TDs did save him last week. He only had 17 yards, but he was able to find the end zone twice. But that's what makes Nico Collins one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. He's picking up yards and he's being looked at in the red zone. He's being utilized all over the field. We're going to be throwing the ball against the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes seems to be healthy. That's going to make this game more competitive. And number 5, Mike Evans. Huge game last week and now 251 yards away from keeping a streak of 1,000 yards every season since the beginning of his career alive. Evans is going to be a big part of any game plan the rest of the season, and Dallas allows the 10th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown at number 6. Huge benefit because of the shootout last week, and maybe that doesn't happen this week again in Chicago, but he did have a season high in catches and yards, only his 4th big game of the year, but his chance at an offensive TD in this game is definitely up there. So we're going to roll with Amon-Ra St. Brown to be inside the top 6 this week. A.J. Brown going up against Washington. Everything's well between him and Jalen Hurts. Everything that people were saying was going to be an issue just isn't an issue. He's still looking his way. He's the number 1 target in this offense, and this is a game against Washington that could be back and forth and turn to a high-scoring affair as well. And with the end of the NFL regular season here, you can bet that I'm going to be finding myself at another Lions playoff game this year. My son and I went to the game against the Rams last year, one of the best environments in all of football. We had a great time, and we'll be heading back again this season, and I'm going to be going after I purchased my tickets through SeatGeek. I've personally used SeatGeek to purchase tickets to Lions games, Michigan games, Linkin Park concerts coming up, Papa Roach, and even more. And you should be purchasing all of your tickets over there as well. Their app is super easy to use. It gives you an opportunity to find the best deals for the concert or sporting events that you want to go to. And with the holidays here, tickets to concerts and sporting events make great presents. You can download the app right now, find some great deals, use code word headliners for $20 off, and make somebody's Christmas very special. All right, diving into the second tier, number 8, CeeDee Lamb. He's really the only part of the Dallas passing offense that's actually working right now. But he's benefited from some good matchup against Carolina, Cincinnati, and now he gets another good matchup against Tampa Bay, who allows the 9th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Devontae Adams with a huge week 15 now has touchdowns in back-to-back games. He's scored 10 plus fantasy points in 5 of his last 6, and he's all the way up to wide receiver 13 on the season, LA allowing the 11th most points per game to the wide receiver position. T. Higgins going up against Cleveland, much better game last week, and now has at least 1 touchdown in 5 of his last 7 games played. It's a lot easier to throw on Cleveland than it is to run on them. Higgins could find the end zone once again after doing the same against them in their last meeting. Tyreek Hill at number 11. Overall, bad game in week 15, but the Dolphins are still on track, needing to win to get into the playoffs and have a chance at a wild card, and Tyreek Hill is going to have to be a big part of that. Also, Jalen Waddle is hurt, and that's only going to help Tyreek Hill's target share moving forward. Even though this isn't an easy matchup, we did see Puka find some success against San Francisco last week. Brian Thomas. Mac Jones is locked into Brian Thomas right now. 3 straight games with 10-plus targets and 85 or more yards in 4 straight games. This matchup, it isn't the worst, and some big plays definitely could be there. I could see Brian Thomas having a really solid day. Terry McLaurin. Now, we all remember the last time McLaurin played Philadelphia. Disappeared. 1 catch for 10 yards, but he's been very hot as of late. 5 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks, 70 or more yards in 4 of his last 5 games. We know Washington's going to need to throw the football. Hopefully, from a game plan perspective, they can do some things to get Terry McLaurin more open this time through. Cortland Sutton at number 14. He struggled last week, but he did find his way into the end zone again and saved his fantasy day. He's got at least 70 yards or a touchdown in 6 of his last 7 games. Jackson Smith-Njigba at number 15. He continues to be the number 1 wide receiver in Seattle. He's the most consistent player there. He's up to wide receiver 7 on the season, and Seattle is still fighting for one of those wild card spots. Now, Geno isn't 100%, but Seattle is going to have to throw it on Minnesota to have a chance. Tier 3 at number 16, Garrett Wilson against the LA Rams. Back-to-back games with double-digit fantasy points, and he's going to have a shot at doing it again this week. Yeah, Devontae Adams seems to be the number 1 right now, but the Jets' run game is banged up, and LA is allowing the 11th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Drake London at number 17 definitely has a better shot with Michael Penix this week. We know he can throw the ball down the field, and London can excel there. I would have to think his target share is going to stay high, and New York does allow just under the league average to wide receivers. Cooper Kupp at number 18, shut out for the first time since 2019. Totally unexpected. Nobody saw it coming, and I don't think you can count on that happening again. LA needs this game, and you have to think they're going to try and get the ball to him early. The Jets have allowed quite a bit through the air as of late. Malik Neighbors at number 19. We know New York is going back to Drew Lock, but it doesn't really matter. Neighbors is going to hover right around 60 to 80 yards. He's going to surprise us at times with a touchdown in a good matchup, and this is a good matchup. Atlanta allows the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Juwan Jennings at number 20. I'm just trying to forget most of what happened last Thursday. It was rainy, it was ugly, and I'm not going to put too much stock into that. But this matchup isn't that much easier. Miami is allowing the 2nd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers of all teams in the NFL, and really, Juwan Jennings, to me, doesn't have the ceiling that we've become accustomed to, but he should still have a pretty solid floor. At 21, Ladd McConkey. Great to have him back last week. At least 11 fantasy points in 4 straight games, but we know Denver is going to be one of the most difficult teams to throw against. In this last matchup, they held McConkey to 4 catches for 43 yards. DJ Moore going up against Detroit. The Bears have just fallen apart. I mean, the offense itself just absolutely stinks right now. And even with the Detroit secondary that is absolutely depleted, a defense that is banged up, DJ Moore could definitely get his this week, but Chicago's going to have to throw, and DJ Moore did have a touchdown against Detroit just 3 weeks ago. Jordan Addison at number 23. The volume he is seeing right now in this offense is one of the best, and considering that the Minnesota Vikings are scoring at will right now, his floor has gotten safer every single week. He has at least 9.8 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games, and Seattle allows just over 26 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. All right, let's start getting into some of those guys. Decent upside, but the floor can be scary at times. We're going to start with Zay Flowers in Tier 4 at number 24. Baltimore has just stopped forcing the ball to Flowers, and maybe that has to do with Mark Andrews playing a lot better, but they are spreading it around a lot more than they did at the beginning of the season. Flowers found the end zone in their last meeting against Pittsburgh, but only had 39 yards in that game. Going to need a touchdown again. Keenan Allen against Detroit. At this point, Chicago's trying to play spoiler. Keenan has been the most consistent TD scorer in this offense. Has TDs in 3 of his last 4 games. And we know the last time they played Detroit, he was also able to find the end zone. Devontae Smith going up against Washington. Had the best game of the year last week. Now has touchdowns in 4 of his last 6 games. And Philadelphia is still fighting for that 1 seed. Going through the air against Washington can definitely happen, but we know Devontae Smith can be risky at times. Khalil Shakir at number 27, he's going to remain the safest weekly option in Buffalo, but with Kincaid and Coleman being worked back in at some point, his target share is going to take a little bit of a hit. Buffalo's already clinched, but they're fighting for that number 1 seed. Definitely need a win against New England with Patrick Mahomes banged up in Kansas City. Jamison Williams against Chicago hasn't had a big game since before Thanksgiving, but in this Detroit offense, that can always happen. Doesn't have a ton of volume, but in this matchup where Detroit might find themselves throwing it a little bit more than what they have this season outside of last week, Jamison Williams could find himself with another big day. DK Metcalf at number 29, he's really been disappointing since his knee injury a couple of weeks ago, and honestly has been disappointing for basically the entire season. Geno isn't fully healthy. The touchdowns haven't been there. They're going to have to throw it against Minnesota. It is a favorable matchup, but DK Metcalf has had some other matchups that have been favorable, and he hasn't done anything in those either. All right, we're wrapping it up with Tier 5, number 30, Marvin Harrison Jr. It feels like Arizona they're just using Harrison as a decoy at this point. Over the last 2 games, he's combined for 6 receptions for 81 yards, hasn't had over 60 receiving yards in a game since Halloween, and Carolina's playing much better against the pass. I wouldn't just chalk Marvin Harrison Jr. up to a big day just because overall Carolina's season has looked disappointing. On defense, they've been a lot better as of late. Jalen McMillan for Tampa Bay against Dallas. I mean, Dallas, this is going to be a back-and-forth game. This could end up being a shootout, and we've seen Jalen McMillan with 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, and also finding the end zone, racking up 6+ targets. There's going to be an opportunity for those things to happen in a game like this. Jalen McMillan could score again. Adam Thielen against Arizona. Now, it's typically easier to run on Arizona than throw on them, but David Moore and Xavier Leggett are both questionable to play, and it could add some extra targets to Adam Thielen. Could be a decent flex appeal in PPR scoring. Jaden Reed for Green Bay. The passing game has been a disappointment. It's hard to count on anyone. Volume is inconsistent. Reed hasn't averaged over 8 yards a catch for a month, and if he doesn't score a touchdown, you're screwed. But this is a really good matchup with New Orleans allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. If you're not feeling like Jaden Reed, I think you could easily say that you could replace him with Christian Watson right here. You have the same type of risk. You have the same type of upside. And if you're looking for somebody a little bit safer, then you could put in Romeo Doubs here, and you could probably get a little bit safer with him. Calvin Ridley at number 34. Tennessee going up against Las Vegas. Tennessee is going back to Mason Rudolph. Both Tyler Boyd and NWI are questionable to play as well, so we could see a bump in targets and touchdown upside in a game where Tennessee could definitely be behind, even though Las Vegas isn't playing that much better either. Speaking of Las Vegas, Jacoby Myers right behind him. The quarterback play has been absolutely ugly, and he is currently questionable with an ankle injury, so we're not going a whole lot higher with him right now. The only reason right now we're keeping him here is due to matchup. Jacksonville allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. If we know for a fact that he is safe and going to play and we're not going to have issues with him, he could bump up into that tier 3 area. And then Keon Coleman came back, only 2 targets, but one of those went for 64 yards. Going up against New England, we could see a couple of big plays again. The Patriots definitely have been known to allow those this season. And like I said at the beginning of the show, there's probably another 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that we could talk about that deserve to be inside the top 36. But there's some guys that have a lot of question marks. And we're this point of the season where we're playing for fantasy championships, we don't want a lot of question marks in our lineup. So if there's somebody that we didn't talk about that you have questions about, toss those comments out down below. But for now, Headliner Nation, it's been a long week. That is a lot of videos. Your boy is feeling good still, though, and we're going to be live on Friday night this week, so I'm going to prepare for that. But Headliner Nation, have a great rest of the day. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. I'll see you for the live show right here on Friday. Have a great rest of your week. I'm pretty sure I already said that, but I am depleted of oxygen right now, and my brain doesn't know what it's saying. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same.